Alrighty, hello, welcome everyone to WorkSmart Live. This is our level up episode called Excellent. And yes, we do love our puns here. So today we're going to be talking about working in OneDrive and Microsoft Teams and more, and all the Microsoft applications that are now online. As I was saying in the email yesterday, being an expert in Excel is its own thing, right? And now we have all of our Microsoft applications online, and that adds some extra layers of intricacy, I guess. There's a little bit of extra retraining almost that needs to happen, because there's so many more options now for how we can communicate and work together on the documents that we're creating. And Microsoft is really, really smart, and it does a great job at trying to help us do our jobs better. So when we talk about Level Up in this new series, we break each month down into a different theme. And this month, the theme is productivity. We do two different things in each month. We do a webinar, actually a couple different things, but we have two different webinars. One where we talk to sort of the admins in your office about improving your business game with strategic tech tools. And then the second part of the month, which is where you are here now, we talk about boosting your tech skills. So today we're going to be doing a little bit of a skill building. So there's going to be, Marissa's got some recorded demos for us, different tips and tricks to help us utilize the technology that we talked about a couple weeks ago in Achievement Unlocked. So with that, I'm going to pass this off to Marissa, and we'll get things going.
All right. So as Dawn said, we have more of these tools and these technologies. So we've got to use them right so that we can create our best work. And to cut to the chase, today we're just going to level up some skills across our apps. What we're going to focus on is file sharing is caring, caring about getting your work done. It's about working together, literally. We've got writing like a pro. And we're going to talk about keeping notes, but better. You have to say it like that too, Dawn. You can't just, it's not keeping notes, but better. All right, so that's right, level it up. All right, so file sharing is caring. I chose to start with this topic today because a lot of what we do with working in the cloud in Microsoft 365 means that it's living somewhere across the internet, which gives us this really cool ability to share files so that we can not have as many copies of data floating out there. So kind of the foundation of this is actually sharing those files and making sure you're sharing them in a way that is utilizing the cloud storage. So first up, we're going to talk real quick about sharing it in OneDrive. You can do it in the browser as you're seeing here on your window. It's really simple. You get your folder, you get your file, you hit copy link, and then you add who you want to send it to. You can include a note, you can change permissions, you can set a password, which is great if you want to lock certain things from being edited. And then you go ahead and hit send, and it sends to the person via email, lets them know, gives them a link, then they can log in and access it from the web app or the desktop app as well. Which brings me to say that there is, as a reminder, because we've talked about this before, back in I think it must have been our basic apps training for Office 365, but you can use the OneDrive desktop app to sync files locally if you'd rather not work in a browser. We've been working in File Explorer. That's this window you see here. We've been doing that for a long time. That's Windows right there. So when we introduced working in the cloud through the OneDrive web app and in your browser, some people, including myself, were like, this is a new experience that I just don't really want to get into yet. So that functionality is there for you. However, bonus unlocked, Now, since we've last talked about using OneDrive in the browser, there's some more functionality that's available. So I want to stop talking about file sharing for a second and just show you some of the cool things inside of OneDrive. When you go to the browser, you can actually see the shared libraries that belong to the team's channels or any SharePoint libraries that you might have. So now you can see your personal files, because before we were like, OneDrive, it's for personal files. But now you, in that one pane of glass, remember we're making this simpler, you can access more than just your personal files. Now you can access the files that are shared at the team level. There's also a folder in here, you'll see it says shared. That gives you the option to go in and see all of the things that have been shared with you or shared by you, which is kind of cool too. Nice and organized. But back to file sharing, because that's what we were talking about. It's super easy to, super easy to share the file itself from within the Word app or the Excel or PowerPoint, any of those. You can find the blue share button and you can go ahead and click it and share it with folks. Again, I would highly recommend that when you're sharing with people, make sure you share the right level of access. We kind of call this the principle of least privilege. If they just need to read something, give them the access to read it. Don't give them access to actually make changes and edits if it's not necessary. Kind of protects yourself there.
And a quick question.
Yeah.
What is the difference between sharing a file and sending a file?
Okay, so sending a file and sharing a file can mean the same things. When you're sending or sharing, if let's say you're in an email and you attach a file, and I'm going to talk about this more in a second. If you attach it as a link, you are sending and sharing that from a place in the cloud. If you attach it as a file, as like a copy of a file, you are creating a new copy of the document and it no longer lives together so that all of the changes are tracked in that one document. So sending and sharing can mean the same thing as long as we're talking about sending the file from the location that it lives in OneDrive or Teams without actually creating a second copy. I hope that's clear. If not, let us know and I can talk more about it.
I think the one addition that I'll add is if you send something like as an attachment, it's just a static file. If you share it, it is a live, living, breathing document, so to speak, that whoever has access to it can work on in real time with each other instead of having the old school way of sending versions of documents back and forth and having to keep track of who edited what and all that stuff. If it's shared, it's just a live document.
I actually have an example of it here in a minute, and you'll be able to see the difference between the two files and just the way it looks when it presents when you actually attach it to the email. Here on your screen now is this really nifty tool that Microsoft is investing in. It's kind of this enterprise search engine across all of your Microsoft tools. So Microsoft Search helps you simplify a lot of things, but one of the things that it can do is you can simply go to this search box and type in who you're looking for, and you can search right from there. So it's just another way to do that. I was just going to kind of go back through the transition just so you can see the video in real time. I will say that we do have a cheat code that just came out. So if you haven't watched it yet, check it out. It goes into Microsoft Search, what it is, how you can access it, and what it can do for you. And there's a couple of cool things in there that'll help you get more work done without switching between apps. So as we mentioned just a second ago, when we talked about attaching an email, let me get my animations back. 1 second. Okay, here we go. Let's pretend like I just did it from here. Attaching to an email, it's something we've never talked about before. From here, what you're doing is you're opening your Outlook message, you're attaching a file just like you normally would. it's going to want to default to sending you, sending the file as a link to the destination in the cloud. That's what we were talking about. That gives you the ability to open the file and work on it with other people in real time and have those changes saved to the cloud. If you want, you can attach it as a copy. You can even change it as a copy, change it to a copy after the fact. So you'll see in your window right now, there's a cloud over the PowerPoint presentation, which is showing you that it is a link to the cloud versus a document that Contoso purchasing requirements. That shows you what the file would look like if it's not. So if I were to open the Contoso Word document and make changes, it won't translate back to where I just pulled it from. So now you have two different copies of the email. And even from here, when you're sharing, you have control over what kind of access this person has. Do you need them to edit? Do you want them to be able to share it externally? So there's some pretty cool things that you can do right from your email.
Before you move on from that, we had a comment question-ish of sorts that came into the Q&A that's relevant. So I want to just check in here. It says, I tried to send a link internally and got a message that some recipients were not authorized. They reached out to us, and the tech person that they reached recommended sending it as an attachment. And they understand that this will work, but it didn't really think that that's the right solution. And it's hard to really step in and answer why that happened without necessarily seeing the document and the email itself. But my guess is it might have had something to do with permissions, would be my guess. But in general, especially internally, if it's something that you're going to be working on together a lot, yeah, sharing a file, a live file, is definitely a lot better in general. But you might, Marissa, be able to elaborate a little bit more here on some of the permission stuff that might have been causing that issue.
Absolutely. So when you're sharing a file, you have to think about where the file lives originally. If it's in your personal OneDrive, so this is in your OneDrive app where you store your files. If you share that with someone and we'll assume it's internally, because once you start talking about sharing externally, there's some permissions that are set at your company's, we call it a tenant. It's essentially your company's account level. So internally, if you're sharing, as long as the file is coming from a place where other people can access, like your OneDrive, you're giving permission to people to view it, they'll be able to. But if you're sharing it from a place that's private, so for example, at WorkSmart, we have a team inside and some channels inside of Microsoft Teams that only allow myself and Dawn and Michaela and Clay as part of the marketing team to access those resources. So if I store a document there and I share it to somebody in HR, it's going to default to the permissions set at that level. So if I have a document that's in those marketing only files, I can't link Nathaniel from HR to it in the same destination. I'd have to create a copy of the document and move it. So it comes down to kind of being smart about where you're saving the original document. It's why a lot of times you'll hear put things in OneDrive if it's a draft. If you need other people to collaborate on it before it's a final, that is because if your final destination is a place that they don't have permission to, they're not going to have access to it. Hope that helps. We can always take a look at it again and see if there's more of a permissions wide issue. Again, when we start talking about sharing externally, if your organization has said at the administrative level, we don't want to share with anyone outside of the organization or anyone without a legitimate Microsoft 365 account, then there's nothing we can do on an individual basis to send those files. All right, I'm going to assume we're good to move on, Dawn.
You're good. Sorry, I didn't realize you were waiting for me, but yes, you're good.
Taking my breath. All right, so another place that we can share from, Microsoft Teams. Who would have thought? Teams and teamwork and collaboration, but it can get messy. This is a true tale. But I bet you thought correctly, if you did, that we can teach you to level up here. Fist bump. I stole this slide literally from another presentation of ours in early April. And it's a good reminder before we start talking about how we share files inside of Teams. And this is because every document that gets shared within a Teams conversation or channel will just dump to the Files tab. It doesn't know where to organize itself. So to avoid or to protect your folder structure, we recommend placing the file in the folder where it belongs. So uploading the file first and then sharing it as a link from there. So what that looks like right here, this is the problem solving for that issue, is that when you place the file in, you're just going to copy the link. You have a choice if you want to keep it in Teams or if you want to take them to the SharePoint site. If you take the Teams and you go ahead and go into the conversation like you were originally going to do, instead of adding a file, what you're doing is adding a link to Microsoft Teams. And I know that link looks terrible. So what you can do is go into the real text editor. I talk faster than my words, but it's ugly. You can go in and edit it and use the hyperlink feature to take all that really ugly HTML out and replace it with text to display, so that this might seem like a vanity item, but really what it is when you're going back to search in the future, you'll be able to see really quickly what it was instead of looking at all that gobbledygook.
So we had a question that came in about files into chat a while back that I want to just touch on here before we move on.
Yeah.
Said, what about grabbing the file from your desktop and dropping it in a Teams chat on your desktop app? Yeah, you can definitely do that. And it's going to look exactly like Marissa showed you, where in that specific chat conversation, there's going to be a tab at the top that says files. And if you just drag it from your desktop and drop it into the chat and hit send, it's going to save that file into the files tab, which is just a really long list of documents. I do this a lot with like screenshots or funny things that I want Marissa to see or share. But it's not a good idea to do that with documents that you want to be collaborating on, because it just dumps it into a random list and it's not organized. So the better way to go about that is kind of like Marissa showed you, is think about where you want that file to live and then upload it there and then grab the link and then drop that into the chat box if you want them to be able to just navigate directly to it. If you have more questions about that or want me, I hope we touched on that enough and answered your questions, but if you have more questions, you can send another one in.
That's right. All right, so we've officially made it through file sharing, and we took some detours to show you some more of the OneDrive functionality, but now we're going to talk about, we've laid the foundation of sharing a file. So now there's some cool things that you can do together. Literally, we can work together with something called co-authoring. And you do need to say this, that it's a requirement that you share the file first. So do the things that we just talked about, and now multiple people have access to the document. When you're working in the document, you can see who's there. You can get some information about who they are. You can see their edits in real time. When you have autosave on, you're going to be able to change all of everyone's edits are going to save automatically, and you'll work nicely together. You'll see the changes that are made in real time. Now, if you don't have autosave turned on, or you're working offline, this is where it's gotten scary before with things like SharePoint, checking things in, checking things out. You don't have to do that anymore. It's smart enough to be able to control the versions if you're not online or you're not auto-saving. In the instance that you're just not auto-saving, I recommend just periodically saving your changes so that if there is a conflict of changes, you can resolve those quickly. Microsoft will give you a panel right there in your Word document that says, oh, hey, you have changes that conflict, and it'll show you each one itemized so you can resolve it or ignore it. When you're offline and you go back online, you'll just have a longer list of things to take a look at, which is nice. This works in Word, PowerPoint, Excel. All of our Office apps allow you to do this. When you're co-authoring together, one of the nice things that this solves for us is keeping things out of email. We no longer have to go back and forth. We can actually just go ahead and have a conversation about the file from within the file. We can do things like reply to comments. We can tag people in those comments. When you have it as simple markup or all markup, you can see the comments. If you go to no markup, you can see that it takes away all of those comment boxes. So here I'm going back to putting the comment boxes on. Another thing that's right there is the track changes. And what this we've always had this function, but when you're co-authoring, it's helpful to make sure you're tracking the changes so that you can see and accept easily. Yes, you can see the changes that are people making in real time, but it's not as helpful as being able to go through and approve changes, or if somebody comes in at a later time, it's nice and clear right there. That's like my mini hack when working on documents with somebody else. You can kick it up a notch, or I should say, you can level it up. That's right, it's not kick it up a notch series, it's level up. You can actually do the same thing in Teams. You can open the document there, right in the single pane of glass. You can have a conversation just like we showed, except this is not comments. This is an actual Teams conversation around a file. You can tag people, mention them so they know to take a look at it. And then forever, this document will, well, unless it's deleted, will live inside of Teams with the relevant conversation right alongside of it. You can see it pops up there in the chat. That's a nice feature to have, especially when you're working with a team a lot. Teams is designed to facilitate this, file sharing and work collaboration. So, I mean, it's pretty brilliant. Makes teamwork work. But live editing can feel like an invasion. This was a stretch. Bear with me. When you're inviting other people into your document, you can feel this sense of loss of control. But the good news is Microsoft doesn't want you to feel like you're being invaded. They have the ability for you to be able to check version history very simply. You just go to File, Info, Version History, and you can see right there on the right pane, you can scroll through the changes that have been made, and you can easily restore or save copies so that you can reference them. All right, Dawn, anything in that section?
We do have some questions in the queue, but not about that section. So if you're waiting on your question, it's because I know something's coming up, or I'm going to save it to the end.
Ooh. All right. So writing like a pro. This is cool because I, as a marketer, naturally think I write like a pro, but I also rely on a lot of tools. So things like Grammarly have always been really helpful for me, but I pay a subscription to Grammarly. Not anymore. I'm sorry, Grammarly, this isn't very good advertisement for them. Their product is great. However, Microsoft has a built-in tool now called Microsoft Editor. And what you can do with this is the same kind of things with spelling and grammar checks, which is nice, but you can actually customize how you want to be, I guess, for these suggestions. What's really cool is that you can tell them how formal you want to speak or write. And you can build your own profile so that it knows how concise it should be or what words it should or shouldn't use. And it's all suggestion based, so you can check it and confirm what changes you want to make. But here, this is the settings. And it's neat because there's a section for inclusiveness, which is nice because if you want to give yourself a heads up, if some of your language has bias in it, it can flag you to help make you a better writer. Now, this has nothing to do with writing. But it's a fair point to bring up, because it does the same thing. It makes you design slides like a pro. So this little trick is called PowerPoint Designer. And if you're in PowerPoint anytime recently, you've probably seen these suggestions as you add content to your slides. Over here on the right, you see the design ideas. And what it's showing you is based on what you've added here, your photo and your heading, title, tag, what it's now saying is, look at all of these options you have for creating a slide that looks beautiful. And it matches your content too. So it's this idea of using intelligence, this artificial intelligence and machine learning to be able to give you really easy ways to do better and create better work, or your best work. You can also, in the ribbon, you can go to design, and then hit the design ideas button for this to pop up if it doesn't automatically. And that's in the ribbon. All right, keeping those notes, but better. I have to say, Microsoft came up with this analogy, so it's not my own. But when I saw it, it needed to make it into the presentation. It's your old high school binder with cloud benefits. So, you know, the binder, 3-week binders with your heavy major notes on top of it and stuck pictures all over it. That's what OneNote is, except powered by the cloud and all things wonderful with Microsoft 365. I'm going to take you through a couple of things on how to create notes. If you've opened OneDrive, you can type. It's pretty great. But you can also, when you're preparing for a meeting, you can go in right from the email, or excuse me, the calendar invite, and you can take all of those details and move them into OneNotes. And why would you do that? Because now you have a great place to see who was required to attend at what time, and then it'll give you a space to write your notes. So a couple webinars back, we talked about taking notes within Teams inside the meetings, the meeting appointment itself. This is another way to do that. And depending on the way you work, this might work better for you, or keeping it in Teams might work better for you. I'm a OneNote person, so I kind of really like this one, which is, I think I told you that a couple episodes back that this was coming. Ta-da! This is it. Another really cool thing I find cool is the ability to use something called the Clipper. And what this does is it's an extension to Chrome or to your browser, and it lets you take content that, you know, if you're researching online, you can take snippets of it, or you can take the whole thing and you can just go ahead and throw it into OneNote. So if I'm looking at planning some upcoming content and I want to remind myself of a blog we already have, I can easily add it to the right notebook right from the browser. And then when I head over to OneNote, you'll see, I'm going to show you it so you don't think I'm telling you a tall tale, but here it is, nice and beautiful as a note. And I can make notes right from here within OneNote, and I didn't have to do much. All right, another way, which is kind of cool, is this Microsoft Lens for mobile devices, iOS, Android. If you're familiar with some other products, maybe like Adobe Scan, these are apps on your phone to help you take things that we normally see in the real world and make them into actual digital files, because that's, you know, the real world versus the digital world. So one of the things I think is really cool, Dawn and I were talking about earlier before I tell you more about Microsoft Lens, Microsoft's CEO is actually saying, we're not focused on making just cool gadgets like maybe Apple or Google, even Facebook is in the game lately. But what Microsoft wants to do is build a platform that actually is universal. It's a platform that connects to everything that we're doing in our professional lives and even in our personal lives, and making them all come together. So you can take pictures of documents and receipts. You can take pictures of the whiteboards when we're back in working together and we're doing things physically on a whiteboard. We can turn those into notes. Same thing with business cards and photos. But I got to show it to you because this is where the magic comes in. So here's a presentation. Here's a whiteboard. We've snapped a picture of it. And now we're going to adjust it. So I don't want the background. We're going to tailor it to what we see here. And now, ta-da, it turned it into a digital file. We're going to take a look at it. Looks good. Do you need to do any cropping, any filters? It's like Instagram for your documents. Be cool if it had like glitter sparkles and things like that. And then you're going to, once you're done, it's just going to tell you where you want to go. Because we're talking about OneNote, I'm going to suggest that you send it to OneNote. But if you do need to send it through Outlook or to somebody else, you can certainly do that. We also talked about copying from the web. If you copy and paste into OneNote, the default format is to keep kind of that same formatting. And I like the sound there. And then what you can do is change the way the format goes. You can actually merge the formatting. You can get rid of that link to the source. So now when I go back in, I'm going to delete this and show you when I go to copy and paste from before, now it looks like just a regular old note. One more tip, tagging your notes. So this is helpful when you're keeping a bunch of notes and you want to be able to find, it's nice that you have sections and you have different notebooks and different pages, but how do you find things within those notes? The answer is tagging. And you can tag for just about anything and you can create your own tags. But what's really beneficial is when you go to search for them, you can actually search for the tags. So you'll get a list of everything that's either been marked as important, or if you want to mark yourself as a reminder for later, so you can say, oh yeah, we had this great meeting about OneNote and Marissa and Don are the best, and I have to remember to send those notes later. You can find that really easy from one place. And here's the part of the presentation where I do the thing and I award you all with a high score because we did some really great things today. And I hope you walk away with at least a few nuggets that are going to help you save a little bit of time in being productive and creating work that's valuable. The technology can do these things to help us spend more time where our brains are needed. And we can do that through this concept of file sharing is caring, working together, literally, writing like a pro, and keeping your notes, but better. Dawn, I believe you have some cues in the queue.
We do. And we have a few more minutes and we love your questions. So feel free to keep sending in questions and we will answer what we can in the time that we have. All right, so question number one, already in the queue from Dwayne. He was asking, said, sharing documents in OneDrive with multiple people has not seemed to work as well as using SharePoint, maybe in the past. Has Microsoft made changes to OneDrive to make it more robust?
So there's, without a little bit more context about what was hard about the OneDrive, historically, what we've talked about with OneDrive is that it is very manual on what you're sharing. So when you are in your OneDrive and you create files and you go to share something with someone, it is at that file or folder level, and you are responsible for giving those permissions. So if I leave the company and Dawn wants to pick up behind me, she would have to go in and reshare those permissions from her place. So that does make it messier. That's why we recommend using SharePoint. Now, SharePoint is built for document management, kind of intranet level file sharing and collaboration. It also powers Teams. So when you go into Teams and you look at your HR channel, the files tab there is a SharePoint document library. And there's permissions set on that library that are more similar to a file server. So where you're sharing out folders and the permissions are there versus OneDrive. So that's one of those things that could be complicated. But the one thing that OneDrive has done Microsoft has done to OneDrive over the last, I'd say 6 months to a year, they brought those shared libraries into OneDrive, so it's easier to see, but you can now also share folders. So it's a little bit more Teams friendly, but it still is meant to be personal file storage and shared at every individual item level.
Yeah, I will say, I was talking with Marissa about this before today, and we've gotten a few questions in the past about like quick access links to like shared department folders, because that wasn't a thing that you could drop into your personal OneDrive before. So it was a pain to just have to go to the web portal every time, and you're trying to work on documents in your OneDrive app on your desktop, and then there's also stuff over here. And adding that add shortcut to shared folder element has been a life changer for me, and has made me much more happy with OneDrive for sure. I personally find it a little bit easier to work in OneDrive than SharePoint, and I think that's probably just my personal comfort level. So to each their own. If you do have more questions about that, or if there was something specifically hard, like Marissa mentioned, that you wanted clarification on, you can send us another question. We're happy to answer it. So this next question is also about OneDrive. And my thought is it might actually be helpful if we talked offline and had you submit a ticket. But I'm going to read the question anyway, because it might be relevant to other people. Alicia says, when I try to view my personal OneDrive online, it asks me to sign into Microsoft. For some reason, my company email and password is not working. Do I need to create my own username and password for that site? What is the difference between that and signing into Office 365?
I think you said this was Alicia, and Alicia, I feel your pain because I did the same thing. There are two different OneDrive products. So I suspect what's happening here is that you're trying to log into OneDrive, which is the personal, like consumer version of OneDrive. The other one is OneDrive for Business. That for business makes a big difference. So when you go to sign in with your Microsoft Work or School account on the OneDrive for Business, you should be squared away.
Cool, good to know. I did not know that.
I always that are stored up here.
Yeah, look at that. I always just go to portal.office.com, and that gives me a quick access to all the different apps. So I've never specifically tried to just log into OneDrive before. Okay, so there's another question about Teams and Skype from Anouk. And I apologize if I just pronounced your name incorrectly. Feel free to correct me in the chat. It says, would you say that Microsoft Teams is better than Skype for business? I'm always in doubt which one to use. And is data loss prevention included or automatically turned on in Teams? Marissa loves to talk about that last part.
Oh, that's a great question. There's a couple questions in there. So I'm going to start with the first thing that I remember you saying, which was, is data loss prevention included? I could talk a whole webinar about why you need a third-party backup for Microsoft 365 products. Yes, the data is stored in the cloud. Yes, Microsoft does prevent or protect themselves if their data center goes offline and stuff disappears. They protect themselves from that. They have a nice policy that states all of that. What they don't do is create an intentional copy of your data for the purpose of recovering it. They do have retention policies. Retention is about making sure you don't accidentally delete something from like a compliance standpoint. There's ways to create different retention policies to make it better, but the recoverability part, and that's a word, is a real thing. When you have a dedicated backup, that dedicated copy, it is built in mind to be able to get those files restored or that data restored very quickly. And there are more than data needs to be backed up. There's permissions, there's different apps. So definitely check out our blog. We have 60 seconds of me explaining why we need backups. And then there's lots of other articles and content related to it. Remind me what the question was prior to that. Then
I have to go back and reread it, but I'm pretty sure it was, is Yes. Would you say that Microsoft Teams is better than Skype for Business? Always in doubt which one to use.
So Microsoft is replacing Skype for Business with Teams. That has been kind of in the works for a while. So I'd have to say Teams is the better one because it's built to be more, it's in the modern workplace. It's integrating all these things together. Skype for Business was an actual product kind of in its own silo. Teams is the app to rule them all.
Yeah, we talk about Teams as being your collaboration hub because it stores all of your files. It can really be like the virtual organizational structure in some ways for different departments with all the different options for channels. You can customize it with how you work, whereas Skype for Business doesn't have as much of that collaboration hub functionality. So it's just, they're different products. This next question made me happy and smile when it came in.
Yay!
Because I could have written this from some of the conversations that we've had. Came in from Anonymous, says, I don't want to sound like I'm wearing a tinfoil hat, but do you have any hesitancy at all using these synced apps, cloud-based apps, since they are all tied back to the individual user? I know AI-based apps and programs are generally created to continually learn, grow, and provide better predictive assistance, etc. Obviously, this is all great work-wise. I'm just genuinely curious what you might think, if anything. Since it is within our company profiles, do you know if there is anything that Microsoft collects or stores or anything outside of each company's bubble?
I cannot speak with certainty on that last part. Microsoft does have a lot of information on how they protect and keep your information private. So there's even, because some of these tools, in our last webinar, we talked about workplace analytics and My Analytics, which is taking your Microsoft 365 activity and turning it into meaningful reports to help you work better. That data, obviously, as you work and it's collected, there is some concerns, some security concern about your information being stored and a profile being collected on your behalf. And so I'd have to pull in a Microsoft rep to speak with certainty, but Microsoft does, they protect your tenant from sharing information outside of it. It does not, it's not accessible to other entities. But yes, it's always a concern with data. When it's tied to individual people, literally Dawn and I've had this conversation before about what information is linked from your Facebook account to what you're buying at Amazon. And so the more things that you connect outside, when you start to connect personally, there's some kind of security risk there. These apps within the Microsoft 365 suite are specific to your tenant, your organization level account, and is intended for that purpose.
I think that's a really good way of answering that question, especially because, you know, we can't really speak to the nitty-gritty of that kind of level of concern when we're talking about security within Microsoft 365. But as far as we can speak to, they're not sharing anything outside of the tenant that you have. So
there's lots of documentation on that as well. Tons and tons and tons of documentation on what they do with data and what they don't do with data.
Yeah, me with my personal tinfoil hat when it comes to data, I resonate with your concern. I understand. Okay, so one last question in the queue. Again, if you have any more questions, we are a little bit over time, but you're welcome to pass it our way. We're happy to stay in chat. So this one's from Maria. It says, we were trying to have a Teams meeting with someone in China, and he says that Teams is not available in China. Is there some way to meet with them? Is Skype for Business accessible in China?
I've officially been stumped. Took to 2:47 to ask me a question I cannot answer. So, Maria, we'll get back to you.
I haven't heard this either, so I think we would just need to take a look and then get back with you about it. Cool. Well, I believe that that is all. That is all the questions that I have in the queue. If you have any more questions, you are absolutely welcome to reach out to us via email. We're always happy to talk. In case you haven't noticed, we like to talk. You can reach both of us at marketing@worksmart.com, or you can email us individually at the addresses on your screen. And I just realized that I forgot to change something in the PowerPoint that you asked me to change. But FYI, next month, Marissa and I are both taking a little bit of time off at the opposite times of each other. So we are actually not going to have live webinars next month, but we are going to be doing some extra videos, and we thought we'd have some fun with it. Since we're both out of office, we're going to do some videos about out of office and technology that coincides with that. So keep an eye on your inbox, and we will be back in July with live webinars and more videos and all the things. So thanks for coming. Yeah,
we're doing it. I was telling Dawn, it took me a minute to not mention to do or list or planner or project online throughout this productivity month. But guess what? July is all about task management and project management. So I'm pretty stoked.
Woo! I'm an organization person, so this always makes me happy. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for coming. Great job, Marissa. As always, you did a lot of good work, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye, everyone.